Are we live? Are you recording also?
What are we talking about today? We're talking about...
Rika, what talking about, you got a mic. So no more comments on can't hear you, audio is bad.
Too low.
Yeah, so we finally got a mic. And we've been away for 10 days, so back after 10 days. It's been 10 days since we last...
10 days since we last went live? Okay. So great. What are we talking about today? We are talking about... let's talk about...
Structures of story.
Structures of story, that's something that we were discussing.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, like just a moment ago, I was thinking about ways of making catalogs, and it's always like you divide every catalog in groups of 2 or groups of 3 because you just like want to unify things, and before you unify all kinds of dichotomies and centralize a worldview, a framework, unify different frameworks, you at least come down to like 2 opposing frameworks. And I was thinking about all the dichotomies that are out there, and how they look at chaos and order, or ways of life, ways that exist in the universe, and human intervention, and what comes out of that, and name these dichotomies all kinds of things. It's yin and yang, but it's also Purush and Prakriti.
Okay.
It's Haryali and Rasta. And I was thinking Haryali and Rasta is essentially the same thing as Terence Malick's Tree of Life.
Okay. How is that?
Dichotomy. There is a dichotomy in Tree of Life which is the same as Haryali or Rasta. So there is Jeevan ke do pehlu hai, Haryali or Rasta. What does that mean to you when you hear that line? Jeevan ke do pehlu hai, Haryali or Rasta.
So many things,
but still, I mean, it surely invokes something. It's not completely bereft of...
It's also a good choice of words. It's Haryali. It's not... like at face value, you could have said, if the word Haryali was used, or was not used, something else was used, you could have said, okay, there is the path that needs to be crossed and the ambition. But Haryali in itself is a positive connotation.
Yeah.
It's not Kate or Rasta. It's Haryali or Rasta.
Correct. So there is no prescription to it.
Exactly.
It's not. It doesn't say that this one is better. It doesn't presume that one is better than the other.
Yeah.
It just says that there are 2.
One is, for me, it invokes intention, lack of intentionality, and how do I put the right words for it? The first one is what happens without there being intention or agency at play, and the second one is the invoking of agency.
Right.
Haryali or
That brings
Rasta.
me to a trinity. There is something right in between. That's called the desire path.
Okay.
You know what a desire path?
No.
I think it's called the desire.
So,
way.
but what does Haryali or Rasta invoke in you? For me, it is
Yeah.
what is happening, and suddenly agency coming in and saying, no, I want this to happen instead.
That's one. That's definitely one way of looking at it. The other, and a part of that agency is to make it easier for the next one who's going to tread the same path. So the consequence of aspiration as an agency applied to that aspiration.
So it's also the trailblazer.
The trailblazer, yeah, absolutely. Somebody who decides that
The maverick, the one who sets the path.
Yeah, and one who decides that it's not enough that I found this path, but it's also necessary that I make it easier for the next one who's going to tread this path. So Haryali and Rasa is also that. There is an intentionality where you intervene into nature.
So not just crossing it, but carving a rasta while you cross it.
Exactly. And hence the one right in between is desire path. Desire path is basically the trail that you see through gardens.
Yeah. Like there's been so many researches, especially in universities, where there would be perfectly cross sections, and then there would be patches of brown in the grains because people have taken shortcuts.
Right.
There's a term for it.
Desire path.
Desire path. No, there's also a city planning term for it. It's a very nice term.
Okay, this is called. I think it's called desire path. Desire path or desire road or desire way or something like that.
Yeah.
It's basically the way that through brute force, repetition of many people desiring.
Yeah.
It's not only human beings.
Our office also has those.
Yeah, exactly. We have those everywhere. So cars, but it's not only cars. It's also cattle. Even when cattle kind of takes similar roads over and over again, they carve this path.
Which is not necessarily the same road the city planner has laid out.
Yeah.
So no one's going straight and taking a right turn in.
Yeah.
People are cutting through the grass.
Yeah. And that's creating a desire. That's like an effect of the desire, and hence a desire path. I think it's very cleverly named. But the same thing What I find fascinating is when Terence Malick applies the same kind of dichotomy of chaos and order, of Purush Prakriti, of Haryali Rasta in his almost prescriptive semi-religious text of Tree of Life. He puts it in the form of the way of nature and the way of grace. So here,
Okay, that's interesting way of.
yeah, that's an interesting.
Like at
choice
face
of-
value, I disagree with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
The way of nature and the way of grace. There is a prescription here,
Yeah, of course, there's a very strong prescription here.
because the way of grace suddenly becomes the better way. Just because I think grace seems like a value. There is a value prescription there, and he talks about the way of grace.
No, and also the value prescription, which is then just by the juxtaposition is imposed as if nature doesn't have it.
Yeah. So way of nature and how opposite is that worldview
Yeah.
from Purush Prakriti? Because in his dichotomy, Purush, the equivalent of Purush is nature, not Prakriti. I mean, one would imagine that a more direct translation, even though that translation is, these two translations are never possible because of two completely different philosophical paradigms that they
Yeah.
come from. But one would imagine that a closer translation of nature is Prakriti. But he almost juxtaposes it in a way that it seems similar to Purush. It seems Prakriti seems the way of the universe as it is, and grace that he aspires to
It's aspirational. It's
is
grace.
aspirational. Yeah.
Grace is what everyone should aspire to, and that's something that's a pattern that we have spoken about, that we have noticed across Eastern and Western
Monuments.
narrative, philosophical frameworks, narrative frameworks, story structures, even. And as a kid, I was very young when I read The Alchemist. It was supposed to be the best book of its decade. I was very young. I didn't know better. And it was pre-internet, right? So I didn't even have people telling me, peer review telling me that this is whatever it is. And I read the book, and spoilers for those who haven't read it. He starts off, he goes on a journey, a quest, as you may say, the protagonist. And again, I haven't read it for a decade and a half, so I might be missing a bit. He goes on a quest to find this treasure, and in the end finds it exactly where he started, under his feet. And that book, for some reason, blew up. And I didn't get it. I'm like, why is this blowing up? Why is this even a new idea? It took me much later to realize that the story that the West was celebrating and saying as an innovation was a normal story structure for us growing up in this part of the world.
Right. मैं को कहाँ ढूंढे, मैं तो तेरे पास में, मैं तो.
So many, like from Kabir to Buddha.
Yeah. Yeah.
The idea that you don't need to
Go on a quest.
find enlightenment, happiness, purpose externally,
Yeah.
or go somewhere and conquer. It's not even a quest. It's not even a quest. It's a conquest more often than not.
Yes.
And you just need to change your perspective on where you are right now. The journey is internal. Is an idea that we have grown up with.
Yeah, the classic story of the fakir who's jumping
Yeah.
on the spot, and Alexander is passing by. And different versions of the apocryphal story, either Napoleon is passing by or Alexander is passing by, and the fakir is like jumping on the spot of the ground, and Alexander is like, "Hey fool, what are you doing?" And the fakir says, "I've heard about this fool and I'm laughing." It's like, which fool are you talking about? It's like, I'm talking about this fool called Sikandar, Alexander, who is going around the world in conquest of the world, and that is so bloody hilarious. It's like, what is so funny about it? Isn't he incredibly great that he has gone and conquered the entire world? And it's like, that's such a foolish act, and I'm jumping to as a response to that foolishness and laughing about it, because I was born in a patch of 6 feet. I'm going to be buried in 6 feet, and that's all I need for
All
my
that I
life.
need, huh.
That's all I might, and I need probably even lesser. So that constant perspective of conquest and quest of the external and the internal, also coming from very deeply embedded mythological structures. I mean, mythology also coming from deeply embedded
philosophical structures
and belief systems. One being of the of ideas and philosophies that emerge down the Semitic belt of regions. So ideas of there being only one God, one prophet, one life. The fact that you will have one birth, you will die, and then you'll be judged based on actions.
And one person knowing better. That's why the TED Talk format. honestly doesn't work for me. It's one person who gets up on stage, says something, goes unchallenged, and walks off.
Instead of dialectic,
Instead of dialectic models, like growing up, we heard of great dialectic models happening as far as the Middle East, as far as Queen of Sheba in Solomon's Court.
Right. Every conversation, every conclusion has to has to pass through a rigor of argument. Arjun has to rigorously take a position that's the opposite of Krishna.
Exactly.
To say that there is no way, this does not make any sense. How can I possibly injure people I love, people who are related to me?
Yeah, we don't have sermons, we have dialogues.
Dialogues.
And Amartya Sen talks about this very beautifully in his book.
And in fact, it goes all the way down to again the language structure itself. Panini, in his argument structure of language, in its syntax structure, proposes, if you will, a quantum framework of a non-binary system of argument, which is there is a 0 and a 1, and there are like many states between the
zeros and ones.
Of zeros and ones between that. The nature of argument being the Indian head shake of being constantly quantum, of being constantly simultaneous possibilities coexisting. So talking about monomyths.
No, so basically the idea of TED Talk where people go unchallenged, where someone get up on stage and say, this is what I believe in, and no one challenging it, which is, so maybe next time we have a huge talk IP. It's more dialogue driven.
It's more dialogue driven and dialectic driven. This is something that we should do at some point, by the way. This is a desire that we've had for some time, and I think we should create a dialogue driven, a dialectic driven,
space,
conversation driven space, which is still as scholarly. I mean, in defense of TED Talk, I just feel that itself, that conclusive inference based pravachan, so to speak, has also come through rigorous peer review. It's gotten there after like series of dialogues and peer analysis to even get to a point of that degree of so pravachan is the speech of the wise speech, the speech of the wise one, the speech of the enlightened one in that sense. And I think there is room for that. There is always space for that you reach a certain degree of conclusion and an inference. But the problem of course is that being that ever getting monotheistic in nature, that becoming dogmatic in nature, that not allowing for a plural thought. Which again, coming back to the
monomyth,
the monomyth.
So let's start with the Western monomyth, and then let's talk about how our inheritance has been different.
So I mean, there are so many structures, there are so many story structures that I deploy when I write, and even before you and I started writing together, this is something that I spent my entire life trying to develop a toolkit for myself, and this is evident in Ship of Theseus, Tumbad, and everything before that I did in theater and television as well, which is that I try to constantly synthesize the monomyth structure that we inherited from scholars like Joseph Campbell.
So let's talk about it for a second, because people might not know what you're talking about.
Sure. So Joseph Campbell was a mythology scholar, and early 20th century he basically distilled the common themes across all mythologies, across Western, Eastern mythologies, but primarily mythologies, but also all stories. And he kind of drew this conclusion from his scholarship across mythologies that it's the same story repeating over and over again. And in other conversations of ours, people can go back and look at our biological understanding of that, why we think that's the case, and why we think that the same ideas of anxiety, of conquest, of resource keeps coming back.
But if you were to, again, not the 10 steps themselves, 17 steps themselves, if you were to break it down into the large arc.
The large arc is essentially this, which is something that we've seen over and over again in tons and tons of
in every film ever.
Which is basically, it starts with the call to adventure. The hero is living in an ordinary world. There is really nothing that is expected. Waking up with an alarm, going to college, going to school, going to whatever work, and suddenly something happens, something triggers, and knock Neo, wake up Neo. Suddenly somebody shows up at the door with a conquest, with an old friend shows up, or a parcel shows up at your doorstep. Something happens, a call to adventure happens. and the first instinct of the hero invariably is to not jump at
take
it.
up the call. Yeah.
Because you're comfortable, you have whether the world you're living in is happy or
It could
not,
be happiness or trust or whatever, or lack of trust or whatever.
you do not want to leave the comfort of the known
Normal
and,
world,
go,
yeah.
and jump into the unknown, and that's really mostly what happens. So that there is a refusal of the call, and then there is depending on which version of a hero's journey you're looking at. Christopher Vogler has a version, and then the eventual version at some point is that you meet a mentor, you meet a guru figure. Morpheus comes to you.
Morpheus, Gandalf, whoever.
Whoever comes to you, you meet Dumbledore. You meet the mentor who's going to help you find yourself, who's going to eventually help you realize yourself, realize your true self, etc., or realize your true power. If you're in most cases you're a hero who has hidden powers that have not manifested yet. So a meeting of mentor happens, and then you cross the first threshold, which is where you start committing to the journey, and so on and so forth. You meet allies, and you form alliances. You meet enemies. You go through a long second act of Jackie Chan training period, which is always like lots of fun and fascinating stuff happens there. The mentor really pushes your boundaries. You wax on, wax off happens, and at this point,
I know Kung Fu. Yeah.
I know Kung Fu happens.
Yeah.
It's all kinds of really fascinating skills you are exposed to, and by now audiences who have been exposed to this kind of literature know that this is going to come later. This is only a seeding for something that's going to come later, and that's why you're excited to see how this is going to eventually. This lesson is eventually going to use. A lot of Zen stories can happen in this point of training, and then of course you start even before you are ready. You're in fact almost invariably before you are ready. You have to jump into the belly of the whale. You are thrust into the, you're thrust into the mouth of the dragon. You're actually before you're ready. A part of villain's army attacks you. We've seen again like millions of examples of this from all films, and the same thing kind of applies in romance and romantic comedies in a slightly different interpretation, but the same kind of monomyth has been seen across structures. Eventually, of course, you go into the villain's
dungeon,
and you're never ready. The villain is OP. The villain is super,
and then you
powered.
You have to believe in yourself and overcome the.
You have to learn to believe in yourself. You have to learn to believe in your powers. Something, and still you're not ready. You attack the villain, but you are always weak. The villain finally finds your weakness. You feel that you have vanquished the villain at one point. At some point, you even feel that with all the belief and all the faith that you put into yourself.
And the villain goes, "This isn't even my final form."
Yeah, the villain is like, "This is not my final, whatever." Yeah. And the villain kind of really reveals his true power, or the villain is lying slain and vanquished somewhere, but actually has a gun, and the audience knows it. And and while you are already prematurely celebrating it, the villain turns and shoots someone at that point. So that's the return basically. That's a way home, the way back home. And then at that point, the hero's best friend has to see the bullet coming, and in that moment make up their mind.
Yeah, and this hero's friend is normally a person of color.
That's usually where
or a minority of any sort.
The minority friend, the minority community friend has to kind of jump in and prove their true worth by sacrificing themselves for their hero.
Now they can live in our country.
Now they are fine. So it used to be in American films. It used to be the black person, and then when the black person became the hero, then it became the brown person who had to sacrifice himself, and so on and so forth. And
or the Muslim friend in
Chunky Pandey kind of a character.
Yeah.
So you have that the Lakshman character, the Bharat character, the Hanuman character, the friend who's like really willing to do anything for the hero. Who Dharmendra character, for example, in Sholay, has to jump in and save. And this decision has to be like made while just after the bullet has been fired by the way. So as the bullet is traveling, as the bullet is making its way to the hero's ribs, that's the point where the friend has to go back in the past. The whole flashback has to play out, and all of that's also a time for reminiscence. That's also a time for that's the way back. And if that friend doesn't exist, then the hero has to take the bullet.
And then resurrect.
And resurrect. So that moment is very important because there has to be at that point then some kind of Deus ex machina. You have to have a divine intervention, so to speak. There is in Coolie, I believe there's a scene that I used to love as a child. There's like this Dargah's chadar used to come flying to Amitabh Bachchan's chest, and then as Qadir Khan fired endless bullets at Amitabh Bachchan, they were quite powerless. And we've seen this Duke's Ex Machina over and over again in Hum Aapke Kaun and in Maine Pyar Kiya. The Duke's Ex Machina usually comes from
a dog.
The flashback of a pet, of an animal. In Hum Aapke Kaun, it's a pigeon who has a flashback.
No, that's Hum Aapke Kaun.
Sorry, Maine Pyar Kiya.
Maine Pyar Kiya.
Maine Pyar Kiya. The pigeon has a flashback and realizes how wonderful the hero has been. And in Hum Aapke Kaun, the
Tuffy.
The dog realizes that this is not right. What's going on is like not fair at all. So Duke's Ex Machina comes from the pet. So that's when the hero resurrects because of that divine intervention.
And then has to finally become the king of both worlds, the master of both worlds.
Master of both worlds. So that's really the final thing, the resurrection, the master of both worlds, which earns the hero the freedom to live, which earns the hero the freedom to be now. And then to free more such heroes,
and then go back home,
and that's really the story of conquest.
So this myth, this structure of so if I were to distill it, it's okay, you are the chosen one, you must now realize and embrace your power, the ordained power that has been given to you. Go to a land where the evil people live.
Correct.
Vanquish the evil people.
Correct.
Get that item, that MacGuffin, the bounty, the promised land, the forgotten gold, whatever. And come back home because it was always rightfully yours. And the person, the barbarians on the other end were always keeping it from you.
Correct. This was in fact exactly explicitly the verdict of discovery. Given to the monarchs of Spain by Pope Alexander II in the 15th century.
So it was got it.
So in the 15th century, this is not just a joke. It's explicitly what was said to them, that any land that is discovered 100 leagues of the west or the east is all yours by divine ordained. And it is your rightful duty, not only the right, but it's also your duty to go and convert the barbarians into the faith and claim those lands.
And you see this in Indiana Jones, you see this in most Western myths, that is go grab what is yours from the evil person.
From the natives, from the barbaric natives who do not understand the faith or not.
It is also a newer word. It was never natives. It was always barbarians.
Always barbarians, of course. Natives is how. So it was always, there is a very deep sense of othering in this mythology, because there is a notion of there being only one true book, there being only one true way, and that's the only way, and everything else is barbaric and wrong, and hence needs to be converted, and hence the other that needs to be conquered. Whereas if you compare that to mythologies of the East, the quest is more internalized. And for me, the example has been, and this is something that I feel very, very excited about talking about, which is something that I've done in my storytelling over and over again. And since you and I have been working together, we have taken we have fallen back on this structure, and almost nowhere is this monomyth spoken of as a structural tradition, as a narrative structural tradition. I haven't seen any instance of this monomyth being even spoken of as a structural tradition, and so we are giving away a very big tool today from our toolkit, and that is the 10 bulls.
10 Zen bulls,
the 10 bulls of Zen, which follows a very similar structure. But it's extremely useful for internal quests, for quests that are not quests that happen by standing in one place and jumping instead of going to the end of the world and finding yourself, trying to find yourself.
The quest that leads you back home with a new perspective,
right,
on the world that is.
Right. So the 10 bulls structure for the 10 bulls go like this. You start in quest of a bull. You start in search of a bull, and you go through wilderness. You're a young person. You have all these questions inside you about the self, about and the bull, of course, is a great metaphor for self or for meaning.
But you have never seen the bull before.
But you have never seen the bull before, and it's a bull. Remember, it's not a piece of land. It's not, it's not some. It's not a jewel. So the metaphor remains consistently metaphorical, and you'll see how it grows in its how it grows in its philosophical framework and philosophical depth as it goes along. So you start with the bull. You don't know what the bull looks like. You have no idea where to find it. You go through wilderness. You are completely lost. For the longest time, you stay lost, and you do and often you feel that you want to just merge into this beautiful nature that is calling upon you. So it's incredible how much of this is also geographically determined. One is a monomyth emerging from a space that is cold and harsh.
Exactly, and where opportunity was never in your land. You had to venture out.
You had to venture out, and the other is an opportunity calling you and asking you to not go out. The nature around you, the environment around you is so pleasant. There is just food everywhere. Why do you even want to go out? That's the first step, in fact, in the 10 bulls. And the second, immediately after that. So the ordinary world is extremely compelling. It's not a dystopia. The ordinary world is quite utopic already. Yeah. So hence the quest is more internal. It's what happens when your belly is full. The second step is perceiving the bull.
The signs of the bull, right?
Yeah, you start seeing signs of
the bull. You see footprints. You see
the footprints. You don't see the bull yet. You see the footprints of the bull, and this could be anything. But you start kind of going down that.
But you're onto something. That the bull is not a figment of imagination. Correct. There is something
here.
Yeah.
And then you perceive the bull. That's the first time you start kind of seeing glimpses of the bull. And this applies to your truth, your framework, your way of life. When you are young, you start by feeling that you want to find answers. You're restless to find some sort of sense or meaning to your life. And then you start on that quest, and you start seeing things. When you start reading ideas, when you start creating the earliest framework, you know that you're onto something. And then you start meeting peers, and then you start perceiving the bull a little bit. You start getting a sense of what it could be, but you still don't know what it is. And soon enough, you catch the bull. You hold the bull by its tail, but the bull is way more powerful than you are. It's again the framework of life, meaning is way more powerful. It goes in any direction. It's your own mind.
You can't control the bull. You can't tame the bull.
Mind. You can't tame your own mind. It's just taking you wherever it wants to take you. It has its own pleasures. It has its own desires. It is its own thing, and you just can't control it even after having caught it. So the next stage, of course, is domesticating it. It's taming it, which is the next stage of that inner journey, where you have to now start rigorously working with the bull. You have to start a dialogue. You have to start a negotiation. You have to start controlling it. You have to start becoming a master of this bull now. And again, if you start kind of extrapolating the bull as meaning, or as way of life, as framework, as truth, or as your own mind, it starts kind of really seeming to make sense in its structure. So you're now taming the bull. You're now becoming a master of the bull. And hence the next stage is that you are riding the bull now. You are sitting on the bull, you're playing your flute, you are so much in control that you don't even need to really hold its reins anymore. You are riding it home. It's completely, you're the master of this world now.
And this is where most Western myths end.
And this is barely
this is when Neo stops the bullet.
Usually in the Western myth, yes. But this is usually in the Eastern myth barely the center of the story. It's and to begin with, a lot of Eastern myths can actually just begin here.
Yeah. Also, like, this is not a rule of thumb for every story. These are classical patterns found en masse in both structural stories. Yeah.
No, but I find it so fascinating. Like even the mentor and hero roles switch so rapidly in Eastern myths. It's always the perspective. There is no beginning, there is no end, and we'll come to that in a moment. That Eastern myths are cyclical, Western myths are linear, or cyclical or spiral in the East. So you are here, but you were here before, because there is this strong idea of reincarnation in Eastern mythology. In Western mythology, there is no reincarnation as such. You are here today. You will die, and then you will wait at the great God's judgment seat, and then you will be judged based on the actions you did, and then you will live happily ever after or sadly ever after, depending on the actions that you're judged on. Whereas in the East, it's constantly cyclical. Based on the actions that you have committed, you will have certain punishments, certain redemption, certain degree of reward, and then you'll be back to square one, and you'll start all over again, over and over again, till you free yourself from the burden of reincarnation, from the bondage of life and death. So that's the mythology of the East. So it's very, very fascinating how that finds its way into story structure. So riding the bull home literally becomes a midpoint of the story structure, and then immediately followed by this tranquility that follows, that the true reward.
You and the bull become the one.
You and bull become the become one. The bull transcends. You know, this is. I mean, in the Matrix also, even though temporarily this moment comes at the very end, but this moment is addressed.
Basically, it's again because they also drew a lot from Eastern mythology. 80% of the 90% of the story in the Matrix happens till you riding the bull.
Right.
And the last few seconds.
Yes.
Everything else.
Right. Most of the story. So they rapidly run through in quest of the bull. You want to know what is the Matrix? Nobody can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. So perceiving the bull, catching the bull, the hero making a choice, going into and getting reincarnated, and from there on, most of the story is just about taming the bull, just about taming the bull and riding the bull back home. But right after that, we do see a moment of the bull transcended, which is the fact that you and the bull become one, and that's the answer to the question that is seeded earlier when Neo says, "Are you saying that I'll be able to dodge bullets?" And Morpheus says, "No,
when time comes, you won't have to."
I'm saying when you won't have to when your time comes, and that's really the idea of the bull transcended, that you and the bull have become one in a way that there is no distinction. You have to dodge bullets if the bullet is outside of you.
Yeah.
So that's the bull transcended. There is a certain tranquility. There is a certain, you have become such a master of not only the world inside, but as a virtue of having become the master of that world within, you have become a master of the world without, and hence you have become one with your conquest. Your conquest is not the other anymore. You and your conquest are one and the same now, have merged into a unified identity, and hence the bull transcends. And the next stage, which is my favorite point in the Zen 10 bulls, at least graphically, aesthetically, it's an incredible piece of poetry. Whether or not meaningfully or rationally we derive any meaning from it immediately, I think it's an extremely beautiful poetic insight, which is the next circle. So these 10 bulls are given through these calligraphic illustrations, and the next circle is an empty circle, and it says the bull and the self both transcended. There is neither the bull nor you nor the environment, nor west nor east, nor conquest nor the conquered. It's all transcended. It's all one. There's a oneness to things, to experience. And there are two films that come to my mind that explore this structure very well. One is Akira. Akira does an incredible job. I mean, if you guys haven't seen Akira, please, I strongly recommend this incredible Japanese.
And you will see the effects of that film on so much pop culture.
Across everything. Yeah. Across everything, of course, The Matrix, and pretty much any film that has some degree of simulation in it, some degree of pretty much anything.
Cyberpunk elements.
All cyberpunk cinema would have some elements of Akira, but the film that kind of draws the most from Akira, I think, would be Lucy. Not a great film, but a charming film at that.
But if you use 100% of your brain, it's a great film.
But Lucy does this. Lucy has the bull and the self transcend at the end, like Akira. They become one, and hence the step that follows right after is back to the source, returning to the source.
Yeah,
you become nature. You become the universe. This is the Virat Swarup. This is the point where there is no distinction between you and everything that exists in cosmos. And the step after that is why it's ever so more interesting. You would be like, okay, so now the bull has transcended. You have become one with the bull. The self and the bull have both transcended. You've become one with the source itself. You've gone with the whole universe, and you are now one.
Enlightened.
You're enlightened. Your consciousness is expanded to fill up the whole universe. That's how vast you are feeling. Now, what can there be?
Yeah.
That's why I find this most
Which
interesting.
was my favorite part of the entire structure.
Mine too, absolutely. I love it so much that the last one is
Return to market.
in the market.
Yeah.
It's
basically a very, the idea is a very, what's the word for it? I'm just blanking.
No, the idea is haryali or rasta. That now you have found the road, now make it for others. Go back into the market. Kabira khada
But
bazaar
it's also
mein.
utilitarian. You have,
Yes,
yeah,
it's-
you have, that's the word I was looking for. You have gained enlightenment. अब उससे करोगे क्या?
करोगे क्या? प्रयोजन.
Yeah.
Your utility, the application of your fundamental truth.
Yeah, you cannot divorce yourself from reality and ignore reality and live outside of it.
Absolutely.
You have to come back to the world and now apply it in whatever way, either spreading it or using it or whatever to the life, to your life.
And this is celebrated across cultures. The Jainas celebrated by privileging Arihant over every other kind of Siddha. So Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam. The Arihant, the one who is like a Siddha, who is a Siddha, but has taken one more responsibility upon themselves to take this education, to take this enlightenment and spread it to others. It's become a Tirthankar, hence.
Got it.
So this is celebrated across cultures over and over again, that greater than the one who is enlightened.
So what does Arihant translate to?
Well, Arihant, literal translation would be the vanquisher of enemy, but the enemy is again like an internal enemy. It's like the bull again. So the one who has vanquished the bull, who has kind of controlled tamed the Ari, and Ari in the case of Jainas is often the senses and the desires and the experiences, and so the one who has conquered that and is now using that insight, using that path, creating that path for others to follow, and hence is a Tirthankar. So that is celebrated across again many cultures. The idea that the teacher, the one who has made it is great, but the one who has made it and has now turned around to create a path for others to follow is even greater. That kind of exists again over and over again in all philosophies, all philosophical frameworks, but Eastern even more so. That the final thing is that Kabira khada bazaar mein सबकी मांगे खैर ना काहू से दोस्ती ना काहू से बैर. Like at this point, Kabira has reached this sense of enlightenment and is still in the market, is still living through the market, because that's the job. The job is to live through it. Na kahu se dosti, na kahu se bair. Not making friendships or contracts with anyone, not creating animosity or with anyone, hoping for everyone's wellness. But what is Kabira doing in this place? Kabira is reciting poetry. Kabira is distilling the most complex truths into intuitive, poetic insights.
Yeah. So again, what I find more fascinating about this is it's that you return back home and you see it's a change of worldview perspective and a new application of your worldview.
Right.
Which is fundamental.
Right.
And that's fundamentally what we have been using in writing our stories. You'll see some of them very soon. And I think today we just wanted to do that. Are you sharing any questions that we... I think we've gone over half an hour, no?
Today was longer than usual, right? Because, I mean, there's so much to talk about in this space. This is something that we've been working on all our lives. So,
yeah.
Are there any questions?
We have a question about spirituality.
Okay.
Some other day.
Some other day.
That's a half an hour again.
Yeah. Great. All right. Thanks for joining in,
so much.
and we'll see you probably day after tomorrow.
Yes, yeah, tomorrow.
Okay. Great.
Awesome.
See
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.